All right, hello adventurers, and welcome to the last video on floor 11. Part 3. Keep the whisper a whisper, then meet the library. So in our first video, we built hash key, bucket index, and a basic insert. In the second video, we finished insert, implemented find, and erase. So our phases 1 through 5 of our self-test are green. We have 2 stubs left, and they're 2 halves of one idea. Rehash if needed, which is our trigger, and the single refile line inside our provided rehash driver. And then the payoff of the whole floor. Benchmark whispers, where we have our HashTable versus the standard map versus the BST versus floor 1's linear scan, plus standard unordered map built in line. The HashTable is flat and beats even the balanced tree. Unordered map tracks it because it is one. The idea here is going to be the load factor is items over buckets. How crowded that the table actually is. As you insert, it climbs. The chains lengthen. The O of 1 whisper decays toward an O of N walk. The cure is to rehash. Double the bucket array and refile every item. Rehash, if needed, checks the threshold and calls the driver. The driver loops over every item. The one student line that we implement here recomputes each item's new home against the new bucket count and pushes it there. Both halves matter, and so we're going to write them together. Okay. Now, this is McCown's last floor in the whole course. 4 of 4, the trees stretch and the associative run both. So floors 12 through 15 are going to be dealing kind of with our archive and the avid. They're kind of, dealing with the end of the course here, going into thinking about the final exam and the wardens and things like that. But we do, the wardens are kind of spread throughout the course. But anyways, so let's go ahead and let's implement what we need to do here. So let's scroll to our provided rehash driver here, which I'm going to just look for it here. That's what we need to implement today. We should have there we go. Here's our rehash. Now, so here is our rehash function. Okay. Now, what we want to do, we want to find the refile stub here inside our driver loop here. So we need to fix this part right here. So this is a double for loop here. Within the second for loop, okay, we're going to say, of course, we have our if, new bucket count less than 1, new bucket count equals 1. We have a standard vector of a chain of monsters, where we call the grown function, and then we loop through our buckets. What we're going to do in here, so we're looping, we have our monsters going up through the bucket. We're going to say grown, we're going to say hash key m.name mod new bucket count dot pushback m, step outside of that one, and then we have the bucket swap, so we should be good with that. Okay, so our driver here is provided. We are just writing one line here inside of it. It makes a fresh empty bucket array called grown of the new size. Then it walks every old bucket and every monster in every chain. Our line that we implemented was to refile that monster into grown. And here's the part the whole rehash beat exists to teach us. Look at what we mod by. It is not the bucket index, which would mod by the old count. It's hash key of the name mod the new bucket count. Because when the array gets bigger, a name's home then changes. Hash lich mod 8 and hash lich mod 16 are different slots. A rehash that copied each item into the same index it had before would be subtly wrong. And that's exactly what our phase 6 will catch and make sure that we implement correctly. So we recompute every home against the new size and push it there. When the new array is full, we swap it in. And notice why it's a fresh array we swap in, not a resize in place. You must never mutate the bucket array while you're walking it. That's what we call the aliasing trap. Our count underscore doesn't change here, by the way. Rehash moves the items. It doesn't add or drop any. Now we need to go implement our trigger, right? Our rehash if needed, which should be down here at the bottom. Yes. Okay. So what we're going to do here, say standard, we have our standard size T rehash if needed. Within this bucket, we're going to say if our load factor is greater than our K max load factor, then we're going to loop in and say rehash our buckets dot size times 2. Outside this, we'll return our buckets dot size. Okay, so the trigger here, if our load factor is over our threshold, which is K max load factor, which is 0.75, double the bucket count and call the driver we just finished. Then return the bucket count, new or old. That's it. Now remember where this gets called back up in insert as the last thing before we return true. So every insert after it files its items and bumps count and asks, hey, am I too crowded now? And grows if so. That's why the threshold check has to come after the increment. It has to count the item we just added. 2 halves, 1 idea. Rehash if needed decides when to grow. The refile line is how. Okay. So let's go ahead and build this thing. I feel like if you're a WWE fan, we got him up. We're about to hit him with the tombstone pile driver here to finish this thing off here. So let's say self-test whispers. Let's see. Okay, so I realized I didn't add the rehash if needed line here in our insert as I was talking about a minute ago. So let's add our rehash if needed. Oh, why is it not auto-completing for me? There it is. Boom. Okay, now let's try running this. This should be exactly what we needed here. Okay. There we go. I should probably do what I say I'm going to do, right? So all 6 phases are green now. Phase 6 confirms it. After enough inserts crossed the threshold, the bucket count grew. Every one of the 7 names was still findable afterward, meaning rehash refiled them all into their new homes, and the load factor dropped back under the line. 6 small bodies, and the haul is thus complete. Now, let's watch the load factor work on the real catalog without us actually forcing anything. We'll say load. So count 15, buckets 42, load factor 0.469. Okay. Now, remember, we have buckets for 32, but we started at 8. Now, loading the 15 monsters pushed this load factor past the 0.75 twice during construction. So if the table rehashed itself 8 to 16 to 32, okay, with nobody actually asking it to do that. That's the load factor doing its whole job live. It kept the table from crowding all by itself, and it came to rest at load factor 0.469, comfortably under the line. Now, let's look at the wall now. Let's call our buckets. And so you see we get it here where we're really at max, we're getting a couple of monsters here in the same bucket. So we have 15 names across 32 buckets, and even after growing to 32, there are still some collisions here, okay? Now, the point is that collisions don't go away when we rehash, they just thin out. With more names than buckets, the sum sharing is inevitable, okay? But the chaining is able to absorb it. And one more time, the trade here, this list is scrambled. It's not alphabetical. And last one, when we use names, it came out sorted because the names command. It came out sorted because a map is a balanced tree that knows order. Here, the order is gone. That's what you paid for with the instant whisper. Now, of course, you can get some differencing in your bucket names. Which name lands where depends on your hash. The shape here is what matters, okay? So let's go ahead and let's benchmark our whispers here. Kind of see what we get here. And as we're looking here, we notice that our linear, right, grows quite a lot. Our BST still grows. We see our standard map, right, kind of not growing less than the BST, and the unordered map, of course, doing pretty good there as well. And then our hash table is going to be these lines here. Look at how well our hash table is doing here. Not too shabby at all, right? Pretty incredible. Our hash table is flat, right? It's an average O of 1, and at large N, it even beats our standard map and even the standard unordered map, okay? Standard unordered map tracks us a lot closely, though. We can see that because it is a hash table. Now, the trade for that speed, of course, is going to be order. Right? Our standard maps keys come out sorted. Hash containers do not. We iterate on buckets, and our names are going to be scrambled. Our hash containers do not iterate the buckets there. So, really, this is the whole floor on one screen. 5 ways to find a name in records. Floor 1's linear scan, floor 9's BST, last floor standard map, standard unordered map, and your hash table. So everything but our column is built in line in this benchmark. So this command worked from day one. Now, of course, microseconds can differ depending on your machine. They can move run to run, so don't worry about that. The shape here is what's important, okay? So once again, the unordered map and our hash table stay flat and tiny. That's the O of 1 promise there. The cost barely moves, okay? And the cool thing is that big N, our hash table is even at or below some of these other library implementations, okay? So that's pretty cool. Now, the one thing here, once again, standard maps keys come out sorted. Hash containers do not. We iterate on the buckets, and the names are scrambled in that case, okay? I said it a minute ago, do not iterate buckets. We iterate, and the names are going to come out scrambled, okay? And our speed here only holds while the load factor stays low. If we let the chains grow long, the whisper becomes a walk. And so here's the whole thesis of this floor. Our hash table is flat and beats the balanced tree. An unordered map is the library's version of what we just built, the same way the standard map was the standard library's version of our BST. But the trade for the speed is the order. A map's keys come out sorted, a hash containers do not, okay? So just make sure you understand that. That's really kind of the whole here. And if we look at the whole stretch, this is kind of the last of it, right? Floor 8, McCown gave us a tree of lineages. Floor 9, a tree you could search. Floor 9.5, a tree that stays level. Floor 10, a shelf that the library keeps in order for you. And this floor, the Hall of Whispers, is a wall with no order at all, where you don't search for a name, you compute where it lives and go straight there in one breath. 4 floors, and this is McCown's last. He hands you the final structure he has to teach, built out of the very first container you ever forged. Sets and maps and hash tables, what we call the associative run, is closed. Okay. Every hall you have crossed stored the monsters as separate things in a bag, a chain, a stack, a queue, a tree, a sorted shelf, and now a scattered whisper. The hall below stores something you have never stored, not the beasts, but the passages between them. Corridor to corridor, room to room. The question down there isn't, where is the lich anymore? It's, can I get from here to the lich, and what's the shortest way? That's a graph, and crossing it hands you back to 2 old friends. The queue you built becomes a breadth first search, and the stack you built becomes a depth-first search. The last descent isn't about storing, it's about connecting. Floor 12, the labyrinth, graphs, is next. McCown nods you towards the dark. The bard tunes one low string and saves the verse. See you all in the labyrinth.